Look closely at his face. Lucifer has fallen from heaven. The angels are already disappearing above him, and thorns gather around his legs. But this is not the face of a monster. It is the face of someone who has just lost everything. His body is tense. One arm rises across his face as if he wants to hide what he feels. Yet he cannot hide his eyes. They stare directly back at us, burning with anger, wounded pride and defiance. And beneath that rage, there are tears. That single contradiction is what makes this painting so difficult to forget. Lucifer is defeated, but he does not look broken. He is grieving, yet he also seems furious. His expression appears to contain humiliation, resentment, perhaps even shame, but also the unmistakable sense that he has not surrendered. So what exactly are we looking at? The first moment of regret after the fall? The rage of a proud angel humiliated before heaven? Or the instant when defeat begins to turn into revenge? This is the fallen angel, painted in 1847 by Alexandre Cabanel. He was only 24 years old, and with this one expression, he created one of the most haunting images of Lucifer in 19th century art. What makes Cabanel's Lucifer so unsettling is that almost nothing about him looks demonic. There are no monstrous features, no grotesque distortion, no obvious mark of evil. Instead, he appears almost impossibly beautiful. His body is built like a classical statue. Powerful, balanced, and idealized, closer to a Greek hero than to the devil people might expect to see. Even after his fall, Cabanel allows us to see traces of the angel he once was. His wings deepen that contradiction. Near their base they remain pale, almost white, but farther outward they darken. It is a subtle detail, yet visually it makes Lucifer seem caught between two identities. What he was and what he is becoming. This is why the painting feels less like a portrait of pure evil and more like a moment of transformation. Cabanel does not show us the devil after centuries in hell. He shows us Lucifer almost immediately after the fall, when heaven still seems close enough to remember. And that makes his beauty more disturbing, not less. Because if evil looked monstrous from the beginning, it would be easy to recognize. But Cabanel gives it the face of something magnificent. Cabanel did not arrive at this expression immediately. In an earlier study made around 1846, Lucifer's body and the rocky setting were already close to the final composition. But his face told a very different story. His head is lowered. One hand presses against his forehead, and his eyes are hidden from us. He seems overwhelmed by anguish, as though the full weight of defeat has just fallen upon him. In the final painting, Cabanel changes everything by raising Lucifer's gaze. The pain remains, but it is no longer passive. Now it is mixed with resentment, wounded pride, and open defiance. Lucifer does not merely suffer his punishment. He looks back at the world as if refusing to be reduced by it. That transformation may also carry something personal. Before painting the fallen angel, Cabanel had already experienced rejection from the French artistic establishment. His submissions for a prestigious scholarship had been turned down, and this painting would later face criticism as well. We cannot know whether he consciously placed those feelings into Lucifer's face, but the connection is difficult to ignore: humiliation, wounded ambition, and the refusal to appear defeated. Perhaps some part of Cabanel's own frustration found its way into the fallen angel's eyes. And this may be why the expression feels so convincing. It is not simply the face of a mythological villain. It is the face of pride after rejection, hurt, exposed, and still unwilling to bow. Cabanel makes Lucifer's loss visible through the structure of the painting itself. The composition is divided into two worlds, heaven above and the fallen angel below. High in the sky, the victorious angels rise through light and cloud, returning to the celestial realm from which Lucifer has been expelled. Below them, he remains pressed against the cold, rocky earth, isolated beneath a darkening sky. One of the angels even appears to reach back toward him. Whether the gesture expresses pity, farewell, or something else is uncertain. But it makes the separation feel painfully immediate. The distance between the two levels is not large, yet it feels impossible to cross. Heaven is still visible. Lucifer can still see the world he belonged to, but he can no longer return to it. Cabanel never shows the violence of the fall itself. There is no battle, no lightning, no body plunging through the sky. Instead, he paints the silence that follows, the instant when defeat becomes real. This is what gives the painting its tragic power. Lucifer is not only mourning a lost battle, he is looking at a home, an identity, and a former glory that now exists just beyond his reach. Lucifer's beauty was not simply a provocative choice, it was central to who he was before the fall. His name has long been associated with the Lightbringer, and religious tradition describes him as a being of extraordinary beauty before his rebellion. Cabanel therefore does not paint beauty as the opposite of evil. He presents it as something evil can still possess, and perhaps even use. Lucifer's anatomy recalls classical sculpture. His muscular body, carefully balanced pose, and idealized proportions make him resemble a Greek hero brought to life. This is not the body of a creature corrupted beyond recognition, it is the body of someone who still carries the perfection of his former state. The angels above him reveal another influence. Their elegant poses and weightless movement recall the refinement of the Italian Renaissance, especially the kind of celestial harmony associated with Raphael. Cabanel had absorbed these traditions while studying in Rome, but instead of using them to glorify a saint or a victorious hero, he applied their beauty to the most controversial figure in the story. That choice changes the way we respond to Lucifer. A monster invites immediate rejection, but a beautiful fallen angel creates hesitation. We are drawn toward him before we remember what he represents. And perhaps that is Cabanel's most unsettling idea. Evil does not always announce itself through ugliness. Sometimes it arrives wearing the remains of divine beauty. For all its technical brilliance, the fallen angel did not receive the admiration Cabanel expected when it was presented in 1847. Instead, the young painter encountered skepticism and criticism. Part of the problem was Cabanel himself. He was only 24 years old, still at the beginning of his career, yet he had chosen a subject of enormous religious and artistic ambition. Within the academic world, monumental figures such as Lucifer were usually considered the territory of established masters. A young artist was expected to prove his skill more cautiously, not confront heaven's most infamous rebel on such a dramatic scale. But the subject was not the only provocation. Cabanel had made the devil beautiful, physically perfect, and emotionally compelling. He looked less like a creature of damnation and more like a tragic hero who had lost a war. For some viewers, that beauty created an uncomfortable question. If Lucifer could appear so noble, so wounded, and so human, was the painting asking them to fear him or to sympathize with him? Cabanel was deeply frustrated by the response. In a letter, he complained that this was his reward for all the effort he had made to avoid producing an ordinary work. Yet the criticism also reveals why the painting remains powerful. Cabanel had crossed a boundary. He did not merely illustrate evil, he gave it beauty, intelligence, pain, and a gaze that refused to let the viewer remain emotionally distant. The controversy surrounding Lucifer's beauty points to a larger idea within the painting. Appearance and morality do not always agree. Cabanel's fallen angel looks magnificent, but nothing in that beauty tells us whether he is innocent, repentant, or good. In fact, the beauty may be part of the danger. It softens our first reaction. Before we judge him, we notice his wounded expression, his isolation, and the tears on his face. For a moment, we are invited to see his suffering before remembering his rebellion. Cabanel does not tell us that Lucifer deserves sympathy. He creates something more uncomfortable. The possibility that we can understand a figure without excusing him. This is why his expression remains so ambiguous. The tear may suggest grief, but his clenched body suggests fury. His lowered arm partly hides his face, yet his eyes deliberately confront us. Every sign of vulnerability is matched by another sign of resistance. So the painting never allows Lucifer to become only a victim. His pain may be real, but so is his pride. His humiliation may wound him, but it may also harden his resentment. Cabanel leaves us suspended between attraction and distrust. Lucifer is disturbing not because he looks inhuman, but because his emotions look painfully familiar. Cabanel's Lucifer did not emerge from imagination alone. Behind the painting are two powerful traditions, the biblical account of the fall and John Milton's epic poem, Paradise Lost. In chapter 12 of the book of Revelation, a war breaks out in heaven. Michael and his angels fight against the great dragon, who is defeated and cast down to earth with those who followed him. Cabanel appears to place Lucifer immediately after that defeat. The battle is already over, heaven has rejected him, but the identity of Satan has not yet fully replaced the angel he once was. Yet the emotional complexity of the painting feels especially close to Milton's Paradise Lost, published in 1667. Milton presents Satan not merely as a beast, but as a proud, charismatic, and deeply tragic rebel. His Satan suffers defeat, but refuses submission. Even after losing heaven, he transforms humiliation into resolve, declaring that he would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. That same tension seems to live in Cabanel's painting. The tear suggests that Lucifer understands what he has lost. But the burning gaze suggests that loss has not produced repentance. It may have produced rebellion. Cabanel therefore captures more than the end of an angel. He may be showing the psychological birth of Satan, the instant when grief, pride, and humiliation begin to harden into permanent defiance. Cabanel's Lucifer is only one answer to a question artists have explored for centuries. What should Satan look like? In Sir Thomas Lawrence's Satan Summoning His Legions, Satan appears as a commanding leader. Wrapped in shadow, he raises himself before the armies of hell like a defeated general already preparing his return. John Martin takes the image in another direction. In his visions inspired by Paradise Lost, hell becomes an immense kingdom of fire, darkness, and ruined architecture. Satan is no longer an isolated figure. He is the ruler of an apocalyptic world. These images emphasize power, terror, and rebellion. Cabanel chooses something quieter. His Lucifer has no army, no throne, and no kingdom. He possesses only his wounded body, his fading wings, and the emotions he cannot completely hide. That is what gives Cabanel's version its tragic humanity. We do not encounter Satan after he has become a distant symbol of evil. We meet him at the threshold when he is still close enough to an angel for his loss to feel real. A monstrous Satan may frighten us, and a triumphant Satan may overwhelm us. But Cabanel's Lucifer does something more intimate. He makes us look into the eyes of someone becoming the devil and recognize emotions that are not entirely foreign to us. And so we return to the detail that first captured us. The tear beneath Lucifer's eye. Is he mourning heaven? Is he ashamed of his defeat? Or is that tear simply the final trace of the angel he used to be, disappearing before pride and hatred take control? Cabanel gives us no final answer. The face contains grief, rage, humiliation, and resistance at the same time. That ambiguity is why the painting continues to feel alive. Lucifer seems to change depending on what we bring to his gaze. He is still beautiful enough to attract us, human enough to disturb us, and dangerous enough that we can never fully trust our sympathy. So how should Satan be represented in art? As a monster whose appearance reveals his evil, or as a beautiful fallen angel whose face forces us to look more closely? And when you look into Lucifer's eyes, what do you see first? Sorrow, shame, or the beginning of revenge? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration of the fallen angel, leave your interpretation in the comments and subscribe for more stories hidden inside the world's greatest works of art.